It was a warm evening in the heart of the city, and the upscale restaurant Ambrosia was alive with its usual energy. The aroma of expertly prepared cuisine blended with the soft hum of conversations, while candlelight flickered against the polished glasses and silverware. The city's elite filled the restaurant, their laughter and murmurs painting a picture of effortless luxury. Waiters in crisp uniforms weaved through the space, their movements smooth and efficient, upholding the establishment's pristine reputation. Seated alone at a corner table was Daniel Carter, a tall, distinguished black man in his mid-40s. He exuded a quiet confidence, his tailored navy blue suit fitting him like a second skin. His presence commanded respect, but there was no air of arrogance about him, only an undeniable dignity. Tonight, he wasn't here for a political event, nor was he meeting with influential figures. This evening was his own, a rare moment of solitude in a life dictated by high-stakes decisions and public scrutiny. Daniel had been a state senator for over a decade, an unwavering advocate for civil rights and social justice. His speeches had ignited movements. His policies had challenged injustices. And yet, despite his stature, he preferred humility over self-importance. He rarely flaunted his title, believing that true power lay in the ability to connect with people on a human level. As he browsed the menu, his attention was momentarily drawn to the nearby table of businessmen engaged in boisterous discussion, words of mergers and stock options flowing freely. Across the room, couples shared intimate whispers, lost in their own worlds. It was an evening like any other in a place designed for indulgence and ease. Just as Daniel set down his menu, a middle-aged white waiter approached his table. The man, whose name tag read Rick, carried himself with an air of stiffness, his thin smile more of an obligation than a gesture of warmth. There was a hesitancy in his posture, something subtle but unmistakable. Daniel had encountered this energy before, a discomfort veiled in professionalism. "Good evening, sir. What can I get for you?" Rick's voice was polite, but it lacked the affable tone he had just used with the table beside him. Daniel, ever composed, met the waiter's gaze and responded evenly. "I'll start with a glass of water, and I'd like to order the lamb shank." Rick hesitated for a fraction of a second before raising an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" he asked, his tone carrying an edge of condescension. "It's one of our most expensive dishes." A pause stretched between them. Daniel had experienced this brand of skepticism before, being sized up not by his character or accomplishments, but by the assumptions placed upon him. He took a measured breath and replied without a hint of irritation, "That will be fine." Rick gave a curt nod and walked away, muttering something under his breath, his tone enough for Daniel to discern the sentiment even if he couldn't make out the words. A shift in the atmosphere followed. Some patrons seemed to sense something was off, exchanging brief glances before returning to their meals. Daniel sighed lightly, tapping his fingers against the polished table. Subtle racism was a familiar adversary, insidious, persistent, lurking in spaces meant for leisure. As the minutes passed, Daniel observed a pattern. Other tables received their meals swiftly, while his order seemed deliberately delayed. Rick avoided his table, his presence only reappearing at a distance as he attended to other guests with ease. Daniel could feel the quiet eyes of those who noticed, their curiosity tinged with hesitation. Instead of making a scene, Daniel remained patient, allowing the situation to unfold fully. He knew the power of restraint, how it could illuminate injustice without him ever having to raise his voice. When his food remained conspicuously absent, he calmly signaled a different waiter passing by. A young man named Chris approached, his demeanor professional and apologetic. "Good evening, sir. Is there anything I can assist you with?" Daniel smiled slightly, his tone measured. "Yes, I've been waiting for my meal for quite some time. Could you check on my order?" Chris blinked, visibly caught off guard. "Of course, sir. I'll take care of it right away." As Chris disappeared into the kitchen, Daniel glanced across the room. Rick had noticed the exchange, his expression tightening. He wasn't worried, perhaps believing that whatever discomfort he had caused would simply be dismissed. To him, Daniel was likely just another black man occupying a space he assumed was not meant for him. When Chris returned, his face held an awkward tension. "I'm really sorry for the delay, sir. It seems there was some confusion in the kitchen. Your meal is being prepared now." Daniel nodded, understanding the lie for what it was. "Thank you, Chris. Also, I'd like to speak to the manager when you have a moment." Chris stiffened slightly but nodded. "Right away, sir." Moments later, the restaurant's manager, Olivia, approached his table, exuding polished professionalism. She was in her early 40s, impeccably dressed, and carried the air of someone well-versed in handling delicate situations. "Good evening, sir. I'm Olivia, the manager. I understand there was a delay with your order," she asked, her voice laced with polite concern. Daniel met her gaze. "Yes, there was. But more than that, I'd like to address the service I've received from one of your staff." Olivia's smile faltered ever so slightly. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Which staff member are you referring to?" Before Daniel could respond, Rick approached, his expression carrying an air of mild irritation, as though this situation was merely an inconvenience. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, glancing between Daniel and Olivia. Daniel looked at him, his gaze unwavering. He allowed the silence to stretch, letting the weight of the moment settle before speaking. "Yes. The problem is that I've been treated with disrespect since the moment I sat down." Rick's posture stiffened. "I didn't mean anything by it," he muttered, though his words lacked conviction. Daniel's expression remained steady. "Didn't you?" he asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had silenced political opponents in state chambers. "You saw me and made assumptions. You decided, based on nothing but my appearance, that I didn't belong here. Isn't that right?" Rick opened his mouth, but no words came out. Olivia's face paled slightly as she took a step forward. "Senator Carter, I deeply apologize," she said, realization dawning in her voice. A ripple moved through the restaurant. Some patrons looked up in surprise. Others exchanged knowing glances. Rick's face drained of color, the arrogance he had worn moments ago evaporating into something resembling panic. "This isn't about who I am," Daniel continued, his voice unwavering. "It's about how people are treated. How people like me walk into establishments like this and are judged before we even have the chance to speak." Rick's face turned red. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. But Daniel had heard that word too many times from people who never intended to change. Olivia straightened. "Senator, I assure you, this will be addressed immediately." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I hope so. But remember, it's not about what you say now. It's about what you do moving forward." A thick silence blanketed the restaurant. The confrontation had ended, but its weight lingered. As Daniel finally took a bite of his long-delayed meal, he hoped that at least one person in that room had learned something. He had fought this fight many times before, and he knew he would fight it again. But tonight, for at least one moment, he had made them see